Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commodore Scott Lockie. We warmly welcome the family of Sergeant Wilson Charles Cooper Kearns, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Service Club Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this National Memorial and Museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Sergeant Wilson Charles Cooper Kearns. Wilson Kearns was born in 1887 in the outback town of Inaminka on the border of Queensland and South Australia. One of 8 children born to local publicans, Christopher and Henrietta Kearns, who ran the Inaminka Hotel. When Wilson was an infant, his family moved to Adelaide, where his father continued working as a publican. When Wilson was 2 years old, his parents died within a month of each other, leaving he and his siblings as orphans. Left to the care of his older sister, Laura, Wilson spent his childhood in South Australia and was educated at the East Adelaide School. As a young adult, he and his siblings moved to the goldfields in Western Australia, where he developed a love of machinery. Before the outbreak of the First World War, Wilson was working as a machinist whilst farming in the Kalgoorlie region. Wilson Kearns enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 10th of August 1915. Assigned to reinforcements of the 28th Battalion, he began a short period of training in Australia. He embarked for active service from Fremantle in early November, sailing on board the troop ship Ulysses. By the time Private Kearns arrived in Egypt, the British had abandoned the Gallipoli campaign and begun the process of evacuating troops from the peninsula. As a result, Kearns spent the remainder of 1915 and the first few months of the new year training in Egypt alongside other new reinforcements. In March 1916, Kearns was transferred to the newly raised 51st Battalion. Having earned the nickname Peter, he was promoted to Lance Corporal and by early June was on his way to the Western Front. Lance Corporal Kearns arrived in the French port city of Marseille on the 12th of June 1916. He and his comrades were immediately sent north to the Franco-Belgian border, entering the trenches within a fortnight of their arrival. Over the months that followed, Kearns took part in training, working parties and routine duty in the trenches. The 51st Battalion's first major action took place in August 1916 during attacks on Mouquet Farm. Having survived the initial assault, Kearns was wounded during a subsequent attack in September, sustaining gunshot wounds to the face. He was evacuated to England for treatment and remained until November, when he rejoined his unit in France just in time to spend a bitterly cold winter in the trenches. In January 1917, Kearns was promoted to sergeant, shortly before the Germans began their strategic withdrawal to the fortified Hindenburg Line. This retreat was eagerly followed by Allied units, which seized the opportunity to push the enemy back. In advancing on the Germans, these units were confronted by well-prepared rearguard defences and booby-trapped towns designed to delay their inevitable advance. This resulted in a series of bloody clashes between Allied forces and the enemy. In April, the 51st Battalion was halted just outside Naroi, which had been fortified to hold off the Australians while the Germans made their retreat. On the morning of the 2nd of April 1917, the 51st Battalion attacked the village from the north, advancing quickly past it until it reached an unoccupied trench. Soon after, it came under machine gun fire from enemy positions within Naroi, which was now behind them. The 50th Battalion attempted to hook through the village and mop up the enemy, but proved too weak. This failure to clear the village allowed the Germans to fire on the men of the 51st Battalion, resulting in multiple casualties, including Sergeant Wilson Kearns, who was badly wounded in the stomach. Kearns was transported to a casualty clearing station near Pozières, where he underwent an operation. His wounds proved too severe and he died later that day. The next morning, the Germans withdrew from their positions at Naroi and the village was captured. Kearns was buried near the casualty clearing station and today lies at Pozières British Cemetery. A West Australian reporter later said of Kearns' death, "Another brave man who has been sacrificed to German militarism in the person of the late Sergeant Kearns. Tall, athletic, and of an exceedingly sanguine temperament, He was the beau ideal of military manhood. Comrades writing from the front say he had a reputation as a fearless and daredevil fighter, ever to the fore in desperate work. Sergeant Wilson Kearns was 30 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Sergeant Wilson Charles Cooper Kearns, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.